In their book Strange Things, John Campbell and Trevor Hall list a rather strange account involving an oddly shaped, non-human entity. The story originally came from the late F.R. Allan MacDonald, a priest, poet, and collector of Gaelic folklore and paranormal stories, who passed away in 1905. The encounter is unique in that it seems to be the first and only case in which the entity cited was shaped like a large round wheel. According to MacDonald, Marion McKinnon was walking between homes belonging to the widow Stewart and the widow J. Macmillan in Dallaburg in Scotland when she encountered what she described as a strange being. To her, it looked like the iron rim of a cartwheel. The entity appeared to roll past her and continued on down the road. MacDonald himself seemed unable to describe it, referring to it as simply a wheel-like ghost. Another man, Donald Macmillan, also heard a strange noise in the same area where the wheel entity was sighted that he could not explain. So spooked by what she saw, Marion would no longer travel down that road. A Tennessee woman encountered something in her apartment that still frightens her to this day. She claims that in 2006, when she was around the age of 42, she and her husband had divorced. She had gotten a small apartment and was living alone at the time. She recalls that it was her day off. That particular afternoon, she decided to just chill out on a small couch in her bedroom and watch some television. Just as she was getting comfortable, she looked towards the end of the couch where her feet were, and there, in front of her, stood a small, naked man, or what she at first took to be a man. Afraid to move, fearing the intruder would pounce if she did, she merely lay there watching him as he watched her, a very tense moment. As she stared at the person, she began to realize there was something wrong with him. This wasn't just a man in a mask. Whatever she was looking at wasn't a man at all. He was very short, wore no clothes, and had no hair. His left hand rested on the end of the couch, and his right hand was near his face, with a finger on his cheek like he was studying me. But his skin, the only way I can describe it, was like old parchment paper, wrinkled maybe, and old looking. Not sure really how to give a description. I can remember no details about his face. It seemed like eyes were the only thing I was aware of. The woman, utterly petrified by what she was looking at, asked in a low, quiet voice, "What do you want?" The papery man did not reply. He merely stood there watching her. Although she isn't sure why, the witness claims she started to hiss at him, not unlike a cat would, and ordered him to go away. With that, the entity seemed to vanish right in front of her eyes. I was afraid to move and just felt cold and numb all over. My adrenaline was pumping like crazy. For the next week, she was unable to sleep in her room. She ended up sleeping in her living room near a door, allowing easy access if the papery man were to return. Story sounds like a typical sleep paralysis episode. The witness does not indicate she dozed off, but was rather settling down to watch some television. Such cases of home intruders from seemingly other dimensions have been documented in countless books, including by David Weatherly in his book Strange Intruders, and by Brad Steiger in his book Real Encounters, Different Dimensions, and Otherworldly Beings. Heidi Hollis has also authored numerous books on the topic. A man in Orangeville, Ontario drops his friend off at the airport and agrees to check their house while they are away on vacation. 3 days later, they arrive at the vacationing friend's house, only discover that someone, or rather something, was waiting inside. Orangeville is a small town in south-central Ontario, located about an hour outside Toronto. It was winter 1998. The witness drove his friend to the airport as she was heading out on a vacation. He agreed to keep an eye on her home, which was in a wooded area in Orangeville, while she was away. Keeping his word, on the third day, around late afternoon, he hopped into his car and drove to her home. It was a good 20-minute drive through the woods until he finally reached her home. As he approached, he immediately noticed something wasn't right. While there were no other tire tracks in the driveway, he did notice that every light in the two-story house was on. He glanced around the property and noticed one set of footprints in the snow leading out of the woods up to the front door. It was obvious to him that somebody had come out of the woods and was squatting in the house, possibly a vagrant. It was 1998 and the man did not have a cell phone, so he contemplated what to do next. He could drive back into town and notify the police, or he could enter the house and confront whomever might be inside. He ultimately concluded that he was going to go inside and check it out. He retrieved a tire iron out of his truck and proceeded cautiously into the house. He entered into the living room and observed that the lights, 2 ceiling lights and 3 lamps, were all on, as was the television, but it was showing static on the screen. The stereo was also on. It was not playing music, but was turned up so loud that the speakers were giving off a quiet droning sound. He also discovered there was a fire blazing in the fireplace, as if it had just been lit. As he slowly ventured further into the house, going from room to room, he discovered the taps running in the sinks, and water was pouring into the bathtub at full throttle. There was a plug in the tub, and the water level was about an inch away from the top. Whomever had done this had almost certainly just left. He searched the house, finding nobody inside. He assumed that the person responsible had most likely vacated as soon as he pulled up and had probably run off into the woods. He proceeded to turn off all the lights and appliances and also extinguish the fire in the fireplace. As it was now getting dark, he decided to leave on the exterior lights so that he could have a look around the property, maybe determine how the squatter had left and which direction he was headed. As he ventured out into the cold night air, he would be in for the shock of his life. What had been one set of footprints heading up to the house was now hundreds of sets of footprints going in all different directions. Some sets seemed to have no direction at all, going in circles and figure eights. Some made straight lines into the woods, while twice that amount went straight to the front door. He checked around and discovered that the driveway, front yard, and backyard were all completely covered in footprints. To him, it was as if hundreds of people had been lurking around the house while he was inside, even though he heard nothing and saw nobody out the windows. It simply made no sense. He became instantly frightened. He quickly locked up, jumped into his car, and left the area. When he returned home, he found himself unable to sleep and acknowledged that he had never been so scared in his life.